Hey friends, welcome back to the Daily Dose. We are at it again, and today we're kicking off day number 94. Okay, so we are jumping into a new book of the Bible today. Today we are going to be in First Kings. So we were just coming out of the book of Samuel, right? First Samuel, Second Samuel. And those were primarily stories about Saul and about David. And we read about Solomon, and we start looking at some of his sons, and so on and so forth. So there's definitely a lot of names that come up, a lot of new names, a lot of hard to pronounce names, but that's okay. We'll make it through. So today we've got the book of First Kings 1 through 3 and Psalm 94 for today. Okay, so we do have a link down below in the description for a supplemental video from our friends at the Bible Project. That'll give you a good summary of what you can expect out of the book of Kings, First Kings. So here's what we see. In the opening of this book, we have got Adonijah setting himself up as king, basically. Okay, so leading up to that, what transpires is David is old and weak. Okay, we read that he is approaching his final days, basically, and we also read that David covers up and he can't get warm. Have you ever been around folks that are like very, very old? A lot of times at nursing homes and things of that nature. Whenever I go into places like that, I will often see very small, frail people. They're bundled up with sweaters and sweatpants and blankets, and meanwhile I'm standing there wearing shorts. It tends to be kind of a phenomenon that once you get up to your latter years, it's hard to get those chills off, right? So, anyways. David is old and weak, and we read that in order to kind of comfort him, they bring him a beautiful young lady named Abishag to tend to him. This was not any kind of a sexual relationship. It was basically just a young, beautiful virgin girl who was sent to kind of just wait on David, tend to him, do whatever she could do to make him more comfortable. So Adonijah was another one of David's sons, okay? We read that he was very handsome, and in this part of the story, we also read that David never really rebuked him, or apparently many of the children. I guess that this Adonijah guy could potentially be sort of a spoiled brat. I don't know, it's hard to tell. But so anyways, Adonijah decides that he will become king. Right, so this doesn't come from David. Adonijah just says to himself, "Hey, look, I need to be the next king. I'm ripe for the picking." So we find out that Joab ends up supporting this decision. We also read that, now remember, Joab was the commander of the army. We read that Abiathar, who I believe was one of either the priests or one of the servants, close servants of David, I don't remember, but Abiathar supports this decision. However, Nathan, the prophet, the guy who rebuked David about the whole Bathsheba incident, Nathan did not support this decision. So basically, Adonijah has a party. He invites a lot of the town's bigwigs, famous people that are of high importance. He invites his brothers, all of his brothers, except he actually does not invite Nathan or Solomon. So when this is happening, David apparently doesn't have much of a clue that this is actually going on. So Bathsheba and Nathan go to David and tell him what's going down, right? So at this point, David's like, no. Solomon is supposed to be the next king, the one who replaces me. So David is not having any of what Adonijah's cooking. He ain't eating it, right? It ain't his style. So he sends his crew to go get Solomon. Zadok the priest anoints Solomon, And we also read that David's crew starts kind of hooting and hollering and celebrating over this. So Adonijah ends up finding out what's going on, and he becomes kind of afraid, right? He's like, whoa, what's going on here? So, as it would turn out, Solomon ends up sending for Adonijah. Adonijah comes in and bows down to Solomon. So, it seems like everything is kind of turning for the better here, right? Then the next section we get into is about David's charge to Solomon. So, this is where we read that David's about to die, and he gives Solomon some final sage advice and instructions. From there, we read about Solomon's throne being established. So Adonijah goes to Bathsheba and asks her to talk Solomon into giving him Abishag as his wife. Okay. Now, if we go back, Abishag was the young, beautiful virgin that had been tending to David in his old age and taking care of him, right? So this guy Adonijah ends up going to Solomon and saying, "Hey, can I have Abishag as my wife? Since David's not going to be around much longer, and she'll kind of be out of a job, for lack of a better term." So Bathsheba ends up taking this request from Adonijah to Solomon. Solomon is insulted and says that if he does this, he may as well be basically giving away the throne. So Solomon has Adonijah killed for this transgression. Solomon fires Abiathar, which actually fulfills the prophecy that was given to Eli back a couple of books ago. So Solomon ends up going on to deal with other problematic situations, other problematic people, and then we come to kind of a key point in the book and in the life of Solomon. So Solomon, I would imagine, if you're familiar with the Bible at all, you've heard about Solomon and his great wisdom. This is the story about how all that wisdom came about. So Solomon makes an alliance with Pharaoh, the person that was the Pharaoh in Egypt at the time, and he marries his daughter. Okay, Solomon offers sacrifices, and then we read about a dream where the Lord comes to Solomon in a dream and basically says, what one thing would you like? Ask me, and I'll give it to you. Kind of like a blank check, make your wish. So what would you ask for, right? If you had a genie pop out of a bottle, what would you ask for? I'm not trying to equate God with a genie, but just making a point here. If somebody approached you, God, Jesus, and said, "Hey, give you anything you want. What do you ask for?" What would you ask for? Money, financial security, good health, a long life. Well, Solomon ends up asking for wisdom. Of all things, he asks for wisdom. So God is so pleased by this that Solomon didn't ask for wealth and riches and big screen TVs and, whatever. God is so pleased that God says, okay, well, I'll give you the wisdom you asked for, and because you asked for a noble, wise thing, I'll give you all the other things you didn't ask for. And then we close this book out by a wise ruling that is made by Solomon. And this is actually pretty ingenious and pretty brilliant. It's a very interesting story. Essentially, there are two women. These two women have babies, and I guess the babies are, around the same age. And in the night, one of the women's babies ends up dying. So she takes her baby and buries it, her baby that had just passed away. She takes it off, buries it, does whatever. And then she steals the other woman's baby and pretends that it's hers. And anyways, long story short, the gist of it is that now you've got two women arguing over whose baby this is, right? So how do you solve that? They didn't have DNA testing back then. What could you do? You've got two women that are saying, hey, this is my son. How do you rectify that situation? Well, here's what Solomon does, okay? So the women go to Solomon, and they're trying to basically get him to decide what to do. So Solomon says, okay, well, if y'all are going to argue about it, here's what we will do. We will take the baby, we will cut the baby in half, and then we'll divide it, and each of you can take half. Granted, the baby'd be dead, but hey, if y'all are going to argue, then that's what we'll do, right? Now, Solomon wasn't planning on actually doing that and letting it happen. But when he made that proposition, one of the women said, okay, sounds good to me. The other woman said, no, 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 please don't harm the baby. If any harm's going to come to the baby, I would rather have the baby go live with someone else than any harm happen to the baby, right? And that's what the real mother would say, you know? The woman who said, yeah, go ahead and saw him in half. That wasn't the real mother. No mother, no real mother would say, yeah, saw the baby in half, right? The real mother would be so concerned for the child's life and safety that if it came to that, she would rather have someone else raise the child than the child have to die. So Solomon says to the woman that was willing to cut the baby in half, this obviously isn't your kid. Give the kid back to his mother. And that's kind of where we wrap up this section for today. So anyways, I encourage you guys to go jump in and go read that passage. Go read the entire passage for today and look at it, think about it, meditate on it, pray on it, and then come back tomorrow and we'll do it all over again. So until we meet again, friends, deuces.